I think that he must have had a sense that a way of life was changing. Um, by the time, of course, we got into the National Convention, you knew how imminently it might change. It might change drastically. And I think he saw he was looking at a country or a people that was going to change radically or, in fact, disappear. I mean, Newfoundland as a political entity did disappear officially. Um, he had a newspaper called the Family Fireside, and he used that unashamedly to wage the campaign to return to responsible government. Um, he and his buddies were all great, what would you say, balladeers, singers, songwriters. He had one parody he wrote. Are you familiar with the poem, The Cat Came Back? The idea is that the cat has 9 lives, and you just can't kill it off. So my dad wrote a parody on that, and the cat has all these adventures and misadventures all over Newfoundland. And the very last verse is the cat lay by the radio dreaming one fine day when someone turned on CBC and it began to play. The cat, she turned around a bit, and then she raised her head, and when they played O Canada, the cat dropped dead. So this was a theme all along, that we had lost something and that we were now something else. I don't know if it was unspoken or it was just understood. It was known that we were now part of Canada. It was a foreign country. It was over there. And when friends, relatives, visitors, people from the mainland came, businessmen, my mother would always say, there are 2 men from Canada coming for dinner tonight. And you have to appreciate that wasn't an affectation. That's not something somebody now is putting back on that, or we used to say that. She was 30-ish, and my dad was 58 or something, when they went out and voted in the referendum. That's a long time to have lived their lives and been part of one place that suddenly didn't exist anymore. So it wasn't discussed. Well, I was a small child. I don't know what the older brothers would say. I was the youngest of 8. Of the 8 of us, only 2 were born Canadians. The rest, so it was very much a Newfoundland household. As I say, you can't turn to a 58-year-old man and suddenly say, now you're not that anymore, you're this. I guess he saw a society that he valued their values, which appeared to be hard work, knowledgeable. I spend 6 months of the year now in an outport, the one my dad is from, and I can't get over the skills and the knowledge of the people there. That didn't die off with Confederation. The people around me in that community in Kings Cove are so knowledgeable and so skilled. They can kind of do anything, the men and the women. Her mother tried to immigrate into Canada in the 1940s, and she had with her Down syndrome child, who was 7 years old. And the Down syndrome child was taken away from my grandmother, separated, and put into what my mom later called a cage, what Canadian authorities would call a holding cell. And after a day or two, she was just stamped rejected and sent back. So on that pier that day in Halifax or North Sydney, wherever it was, my mother developed a very strong opinion about Canada for that reason. Stayed with her whole life. Yeah. I grew up in a household where the name was anathema. I mean, it was just understood. He was the rogue, he was evil, he was the devil, he was the man who stole our country. That was clear. And my first employer, believe it or not, as a graduate from university, was Mr. Smallwood. He actually phoned my house, and a bunch of hippies living together, and somebody said, "Marge, Joe Smallwood on the phone." And so, thinking it was a friend who was pranking me, I went over, "Hi, Joe." And he said, "Yes, Miss Doyle, I've just been given your name by the English department. I'm looking for a young student to come and be my researcher on the Book of Newfoundland." So anyway, that was my first job. I worked in an intimate setting with him. It was in a house on Forest Road. So we were small forces. He was there every day. And I met with him every morning because I was writing the short biographical sketches for what was, I suppose, a DMB. And he would call me in in the morning, and I would have a list of names. It's alphabetical, so I'm in the E's, and he says, "Oh, I want 2 inches on this guy," print inches. I want 2 inches on him, ½ inch on him, 16 inches on him. And you can guess where his biases were coming from. Anyway, I was absolutely amazed because, first of all, he was really small. And secondly, he had kind of style in his own way, wore a smoking jacket, that kind of thing. He was an absolutely outstanding employer. He paid well. I was a kid just out of university. In the early 70s, he paid me $1,000 a month for a summer job. It was a writing job. And he was an excellent employer in that he didn't care what you looked like or he didn't care about anything. Here's what I want you to do today. Go do it. Which I think is pretty good in an employer. So that kind of had to make me adjust my set in terms of him as a man. But I have to say it didn't change my view at all about Confederation or what he had done. And interestingly, this was 1974. So it was the 25th anniversary, the silver anniversary. And so there was a lot of hoopla. The conservatives were in power. There was a lot of hoopla, a lot of fuss, a lot of events. And there I was with, the man who was left out of the party. But I didn't have any sympathy for him. Well, now I think I would think mostly about where we stand in Canada, which seems to me to be kind of pathetic. We're a small population. We shouldn't be in the mess we're in, and we have huge natural resources. So that's kind of where I stand now. In terms of looking back on it, I think about the way we went into Confederation. So if, for example, we had been allowed to return to responsible government, even for a few years, to have that little period of time between no government, or no democratic government, and the vote, how different might things have been? For example, when people went to the polls in 1948, there hadn't been an election, aside from the National Convention, but there hadn't been an election since 1932, 33. That's, picture it now, every 4 years, supposedly, but it's not always that, there's an election. But in that period, that 16 or whatever many years, there had been no election, no campaigning, no awareness of parties. And this is the people who went out and voted. If you were in your 20s or 30s, you were voting for the first time in your life. Imagine being 30-something and never having voted before. I don't think people had enough experience with thinking about. They weren't used to campaigns. They weren't used to election. They weren't used to rhetoric. They were just used to commission of government, a lack of democracy, you could say. Now, I don't think that was a very nice way for us to go into such a monumental decision. This just wasn't this party or that party, this guy or this woman or something like that. This was, are we going to give up being a dominion, colony country, whatever, and go in, throw our lot in with another country that we really have nothing to do with? Really, we have nothing to do, almost nothing to do with this country. We're really going to do that after all these years of not voting, after these years of not feeling enfranchised, but feeling disenfranchised? Well, my strongest feeling about Confederation is that I wish we had stuck with the first ballot in the referendum, the idea of voting for responsible government. Do that, go back to that, and then see what would have happened after 4 years.